Roxanne Jackson, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Thanks for inviting me to be part of this.
So maybe we could talk a little bit about your early life. And did you always know that you were an artist?
My one of my first conscious memories or thoughts, my first conscious, not memories, but thoughts was like, oh, I'm going to be an artist. Yes. So I always knew.
How did you know?
Well, I don't really know. I just remember literally like that's one of two first thoughts that I remember that were conscious, like I will be this or I believe in this. But maybe because my dad was really creative and did a lot of art with me. Well, he's a musician, but he also like just drew and painted and made things with driftwood. Like he was just always making things, never in a professional way, never to show at an art gallery or to sell even. Like there, he really had no interest or concern about that, but he just was making things all the time. So he did that with me, and I would color, and I would just always made stuff too, I guess. So
You always got a certain kind of joy from just being creative,
yeah, yeah.
make
And it
making
just, I
things.
always
Yeah.
did it, and it was always really encouraged. Like, I always got complimented on it. And then, as a little kid, I would always win drawing contests and stuff. So I guess I had confidence in it.
So you always were interested in art, drawing, sculptures, and through high school, and then you went to undergrad for art.
Wasn't always interested in sculpture. In fact, I didn't do sculpture until I was in undergrad. And the first sculpture class I took was a ceramics class. But my undergraduate degree is in botany. And then
Ah,
after I took a ceramics class, honestly, because my dad was pressuring me, I was getting straight A's in all these really hard science classes. And my dad didn't care at all. He was just confused why I was not doing art. It just made no sense because I did art my whole life.
how did you get into botany?
Because I was a river guide at the time, I was a river guide for a long time, 14 years. And as a river guide, depending on the river that I was working on, I mostly worked in California, but I also worked in Alaska, but that came later, and also the country of Nepal, which came later. But mostly I did California, a little bit in Oregon, and then Grand Canyon once. But being in that role, again, to clarify, depending on what river you're on. So if you're on a more simple river in terms of danger and safety and like level of difficulty when it comes to rapids, then your role becomes more of that of a naturalist. So our perspective was really trying to save the riparian environment to prevent less damming and of rivers to turn into reservoirs, basically, which basically kills the riparian environment and turns it into something else. And so it was really kind of political. We would get people to write letters to senators and stuff like that. And then also that part was being a naturalist, meaning my role, I felt like, was to interpret the landscape to people so that they would have an appreciation for the biodiversity of the riparian environment. So that would be like talking about geology, because we'd be in a canyon with rocks and sometimes exploring limestone caves as a little side activity, but also just pointing out plants. And unfortunately, plants that a lot of people can identify with or care about are the ones that have, when you talk about real uses for humans. So that's a sector of like ethnobotany. So like, hey, you could chew on the bark of a willow tree and that will help your headache go away because that's what they make aspirin out of, for example. So I was doing that. I was pointing out the plants and like the uses, benefits for humans. And so then when I went to undergrad, when I was like, what am I going to study? And I was like really deep in, being a river guide at that point in time. Yeah, obviously it's a seasonal job. I just felt like I should study plants. I took a really hard class, like a very, like from one of the hardest professors at the school, Humboldt State University. And, I got really good grade and just like learned a lot. Was really into learning about how plants work. And so I didn't take an art class, and that is still mysterious to me why I didn't study art. But what I usually tell people, what I think is the answer to that is that I wasn't ready to do it in a formal way because it to me was something that was really personal. Like I made art my whole life, but I wasn't taking art. It wasn't in classes. It wasn't in
Mm.
art classes. It was just like on my own, collage, drawing, coloring, what painting, whatever.
There's so many things here that there's so many
I
different
know.
paths.
Sometimes my answers are long. So
So, but maybe we could just back up a little bit to you're a river guy. You grew up in Northern California, and
well,
who
I was born in the East Bay, went to undergrad in Northern California, was a river
Humboldt
guide.
State, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were. How did you get into being a river guide, and who were you guiding?
Okay, yeah. So when I was 18, okay, so I was born in the East Bay, but I grew up in the Central Valley, which no offense to people from the Central Valley, but it's definitely not the coolest place in California. When you tell people you're from California, if they're not, they just think you're like like surfs up. You're from Santa Cruz, not from Santa Cruz, or you're just like from Lake Tahoe, not from Lake Tahoe, or you're
I mean,
from Santa
It's a big
Barbara, not from
state.
Barbara. Like it's a big state. I'm from like the one of the like kind of poorest and most uneducated areas of California, like the Central Valley. Very hot, not a lot going on culture-wise. So basically what I'm trying to say is I was doing everything in my power when I was like 18 years old to get out of that. And I knew I wanted to be in the mountains. Or I knew I wanted to be in nature. So I kept applying I looked through the Forest Service to apply for jobs, and I thought I could get maybe like a tree planting job or cutting trails or that kind of job. But I missed the season for that. But what they were hiring for was wildland firefighters, which is not necessarily what I wanted. But anyway, nonetheless, long story short, I kept pursuing that avenue, basically bugging them until I got an interview and then I got hired. So my first job in the woods, the thing that got me out of the Central Valley, was a job working for the Forest Service as a wildland firefighter. And then while I was doing that job, which it's a lot of work and it's super intense.
I hear it's like one of the hardest jobs.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot more hard now because of global warming. This was a long time ago, so I wasn't exposed to what a lot of people are experiencing now. But I met some people that were a river guide, and I was like, oh my God, this sounds like so much better. So I just found out, how do you become a river guide? Oh, you go to a guide school, and then maybe the company that does the guide school will hire you. And that's what happened. So that's how I got into it.
So
And
you're
then
guiding, like it's like guided tours.
Oh yeah, yeah. So you said, what does that entail? So yeah, I started out in easy rivers, but I did it for 14 seasons. So, my skill really progressed. So it's like forward paddle, go through rapids. It's all fun. And, for like I said, in the beginning, I was working easier rivers, but as my skill developed, I started working a lot more challenging rivers and more remote rivers. So, like in Alaska, 2-week trips in Alaska. I rode a boat down the Grand Canyon. For that, I had a solo boat. I just had the gear boat because in Grand Canyon, you have to have a license to be a river guide. So you have to do the Grand Canyon 3 times and literally get a license. It looks like a driver's license before you can take commercial people. But when I rode a boat down for a commercial company, basically it was like a baggage boat. That's what I wanted because I knew that my career as a river guide was ending because I was going to start grad school for art. So towards the end of my career, I kind of checked off all these things on my bucket list because I basically had a really good CV in terms of my experience of the rivers that I worked on. So the last few years, I was a river guide in the country of Nepal, Alaska, and then rode a boat down the Grand Canyon. But
Amazing.
otherwise, I was working various rivers in California, some more remote and pristine and then some just like everybody who's a river guide in California works on the South Fork of the American River. That's where I started. But then I worked lots of different rivers after that.
Did some of these experiences sort of feed into your life as an artist?
100%. Yeah. So one of my favorite rivers that I ever worked on, other than, Alaska was incredible and Nepal, different rivers were just so gorgeous, but I really have a deep connection to the Tuolumne River. And I spent a lot of many years on that river that comes out of Yosemite National Park. And then I also spent a lot of time on the Kings River, which comes out of Kings Canyon National Park. So just being on these more pristine and beautiful rivers, like the culture that was less like, I don't know, the culture that celebrated pristine wilderness more than just like rapids as a ride,
Mm.
where that was more my jam, I guess you could say. Like, I really wanted to be in I really started really appreciating the fact that as a guide or in this livelihood, I could experience terrain that it would be really difficult to get to any other way. Like car can't access where I am. I mean, especially in places like Alaska, because we would drive in where we would put the boats in the river, but it would be 2 week river, 2 week trip going downstream. So we'd pass lots of different terrain and we'd fly out in small helicopters. We'd actually be in places, there's no other way to access this.
Amazing.
Yeah, so that uh, definitely seeped into my work in a way that it took me a long time to understand how, but just the idea of feeling like especially in Alaska, like seeing so many grizzly bears, I lost count, literally lost count of how many grizzly bears I saw. I was like trying to count the wildlife. It was easy to count wolves because I only saw one, but in terms of moose and bald eagles and grizzly bears and like I'm sure there's a lot more that I'm not thinking of right now. Like I lost count. And so when you are not near a car or a cabin, when you're staying in a tent in this vast like epic landscape of Alaska, and you're the person that's the guide. So you're kind of responsible for 12 guests. And the only thing that you have to protect yourself is a can of cayenne pepper spray from a grizzly bear. Like, I haven't really had that experience before. I've seen lots of animals in the wild. I've had some really confrontational moments. I mean, I had one with a couple mountain lions in California, and that was pretty intense. But bears, it's like you really feel vulnerable. And like I really experienced feeling like I was just an animal on the food chain and I wasn't the apex predator, that's for sure. And like that, I know that idea, that fear and also exhilaration that comes from that reality and the experience of basically being face to face with a giant wild animal that could easily kill you, affected my work for sure.
It was towards the end of that time where you realized that you had to pursue life as an artist and you applied to some grad schools. You ended up going to University of Nebraska
In Lincoln.
in Lincoln. Okay, cool. So at this point, you're pretty committed to your practice, I assume.
I mean, honestly, it was kind of amazing that I got into grad school because like I said, having a botany degree from undergrad, I ended up getting a studio art minor. I only had two ceramics classes in undergrad, so I didn't even have advanced ceramics. And then I ended up I went to, spent several months in India and Nepal, like 7 months. I think I did. Yeah, I just said that. I had a really intense experience in Nepal. The short end of the story is when I was river guiding there, somebody drowned on a river trip that I was on. And it really made me realize that I need to do art because art was always the thing. And I had been procrastinating for fear that can't fully understand. I kind of alluded to it earlier. Like, why did I study botany in school and not art? It's like I knew that I would always get to this thing, but I was putting on the back burner, putting on the back burner, putting on the back burner. And then there were some traumatic deaths in my family that happened. And then, like, I saw someone drown on the river in Nepal. And that really was like, life is short, do it now. So I had a real epiphany in Nepal. And then I spent a bunch of days trekking after that, like 65 days, basically after the drowning. And then I did a little bit more river guiding there, but I kind of needed a break from the river because I was having nightmares and stuff. And then so I spent a lot of time in trekking, so in the Himalayas and the foothills of the Himalayas. And then yeah, I came back and I didn't really know how I was going to get into graduate school because I didn't have a portfolio for grad school, like definitely not. But I came back to California and some of my friends knew that were river guides, knew what had happened, heard about the story, of someone drowning. And then long story short, I had friends just welcome me to Colorado. Like, hey, you can stay with me. I can get you a job with a snowboarding pass because I used to snowboard at the time. And then another friend that was just going on a road trip from California to Colorado and invited me to come tag along. And I was like, this is a sign. And I was all about signs because when you're traveling in India and Nepal for 7 months, you just like go with the flow, when you're in your 20s. So I moved to Colorado and then I was like, why am I here? I mean, I like to snowboard, but I also just had this really intense experience. And I just sometimes snowboarding and ski culture, like no offense, but it can be really just talking about like fresh powder all the time. And I felt like I had so much more to talk about. And it was also when I was there, I had my first experience with very intense first experience with plant medicine in my late 20s. I don't know that I forgot the question, but that all led to grad school for me, I guess.
It seems like everything sort of crystallized in this moment where you had this experience of realization how fragile, tenuous life is. And then it seems like you were at the perfect sort of moment to really embrace being an artist at this point.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I had so when I was first there and I was teaching snowboarding and on what's the name of that mountain? Well, a couple mountains. First Snowmass Village. I taught snowboarding there and then Buttermilk. Anyway, one day I like hitchhiked because I missed the bus to go home from the mountain. And I'm not really a hitchhiker. I think it was like the first time I ever hitchhiked and probably the last. But I ended up getting picked up by this woman and she started asking me all these questions because I had just moved to Colorado and just got this job and just was settled in there, but was like shocked from the experience that I just mentioned to you that was traumatic. And through our conversation, she found out that, oh, I had just been traveling in Asia and that I really love Nepal and that like I had just graduated from undergrad recently with a botany degree, but I really wanted to do ceramics. And literally, she was like, my husband runs the ceramic program at Anderson Ranch Art Center, and he leads people to Nepal every year. And I think you should meet him. It was just like, it just was meant to be. This conversation was meant to be. And also this woman, of course, I got to know her, still know her, but for years later, we would talk about this. She never picked up a hitchhiker before. This whole thing was meant to be. So I go to Anderson Ranch and I had never even heard of it before. And then I start walking around as soon as I get out of the car or however I get there, I guess with her, I can't remember her name right now, Susan Casebeer. I get out of the car and I start walking around and I felt electricity coming up through my feet. Like I could feel this charge. I was like, okay, I'm supposed to be there here. And then I just rented a studio. So I just had a studio there and I learned how to build because I didn't really know how to make three-dimensional objects with clay because of my two-dimensional background of just drawing all the time. When I did do ceramics in undergrad, I was basically making platters and drawing on them or carving in them images, or I would roll out a slab like a pancake of clay and just roll it into a form like a cone, and then carve and draw on it to make a vase. So I wasn't able to think in three dimensions. But then I learned that a little bit at Anderson Ranch Art Center and was able to build up a portfolio that basically got me into grad school miraculously. But it all worked out.
Before you went to Anderson Ranch, you knew that you were going to do ceramics.
Correct. Because when the first ceramic class that I took, well, I had one in community college,
Right.
but the first ceramic class that I took that actually taught me some hand building skills in undergrad at Humboldt State University, my first teacher had told me that he had a chemistry degree in undergrad and that he went to graduate school for ceramics, and that planted the seed. I didn't even know what graduate school was. There was no one in my family that had gone to college at that degree, at that level, higher education. So I didn't even know what graduate school was, but I was like, I'm sure that's easy to figure out.
How was the experience of grad school?
It was mixed. It was really mixed. I went to a 3-year program because I knew that I needed that because I still didn't really know how to, I had a lot of ideas, but I didn't have the skill to articulate them in clay. And I mean, that was really painfully obvious at least in the first year of grad school. But I took a lot of classes that weren't required of me, that were more at the beginning level, just so I could kind of catch up with my peers in that way. But one of my professors in grad school basically said that, like, you can't really make the work, but you have a ton of ideas. And what we're used to, especially in like a ceramic program, it was also very pottery centric, was that they have people, because it's ceramics, because like craft traditions are really steeped in like developing skill, but maybe traditionally not a lot of like idea development behind that, let's say. So I was surrounded by people that could build anything off the wheel or just like make these gorgeous, perfect objects. And like mine would kind of fall apart when you walked around them because my brain thought in 2D at this point in time, but it switched. Now it's the opposite. Now I can't draw at all. So I just had to develop my skills, and that was so it was a really, really great experience for me, but it was also a harsh reality for me in a lot of ways because I thought I was just going to art school, and I always thought of clay as just a medium to express oneself like any other art form. The harsh reality was when I got there, it's like, oh, no, 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 no. You don't get to just express ideas with this material. You can't glue beef jerky onto your pieces, which is what I was doing. I was abruptly confronted with all the rules and expectations of the ceramic medium, tied to its like history with craft. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
The physical reality.
yeah, I was literally told by my peers, not even my professors, oh, you can't do that. You can't use hot glue. You can't use beef jerky. You can't use rose petals. This is a ceramic program. All the work has to be archival. And, I'm kind of always been rebellious for better, for worse. So I was just like, oh, yeah, you're going to tell me what to do, what I can and can't do. Watch me, motherfuckers. And then that really kind of put me on a path of just like confronting things and pushing against these expectations of what craft is and what it should look like and like what beauty is and what that should look like and like forbidden imagery. So that really kind of set me when I was challenged, kind of put me on my path.
But looking at your work now, it seems very free, but also at the same time, it seems extremely sophisticated in the skill and in the craft of it.
Yeah, yeah. So, grad school was an amazing experience for me. Like it taught me so much, and in retrospect, amazing. But like, I kind of suffered a lot from grad school for many reasons. One, I just had this really traumatic experience that I was still dealing with. So a lot of my work was really, really, really dark. Like, and in addition to that, just my family, my childhood, there was a lot of trauma. There's a lot of stuff, so it was a really cathartic experience, the work that I made. The work I make now is like a comedy show in comparison to the nature of the work that I was making during grad school. So it was hard, but it was also challenging for me because um, I don't know, we were having a lot of these conversations about art versus craft, like those were the conversations, the colloquium, the grad seminars were about art versus craft. And I just didn't really find that debate very interesting. I just didn't care. I was like, I don't think craft is a bad word. I don't think craft is lower than art. I don't understand why we just keep talking about this. It just didn't make sense to me, like, but then I realized, oh, these ceramic artists and people that were making pots, some of them really felt like there was a glass ceiling above them. Like fine art is way up here, craft is down here, glass. So then I was like, oh, this is over time after the post-trauma of grad school that I experienced. It took me honestly like 10 years to be able to just make straight up ceramic work and using glaze. Like when I got to grad school, I was making ceramic sculptures that were completely flocked, so you couldn't even see glaze. Like I wasn't even using glaze hardly, or I'd put wigs on them, or I'd put fur on them, but a lot of fur. Or, I was like, you couldn't tell that I was a ceramic artist. It would look like I was just a sculptor using mixed media. And it was like, in a way, I was like, there was some shame from grad school, and I found myself at a residency program in Berlin, the Ceramic Center Berlin, and I found myself in a room with clay and a kiln, and I was like, here you go. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, and I also just got my full-time teaching job. I actually just got my first full-time teaching job, and that was teaching ceramics. So, and I was able to put that off so I could do this like 4.5 month residency for ceramics. So I just felt like the universe was telling me something. Like, here's clay, here's a kiln, here's a job where you're going to teach ceramics, professor. So I just started like making ceramics and like forgetting about all this, letting go of the trauma and just letting all that baggage go. I didn't really realize this until later. And I was able to fall in love with the medium and fall in love with the glaze and like really have a strong case for like why I work with this material. And then I started pretty much letting go of mixed media for the most part.
Did you teach immediately after grad school?
I did teach immediately, not as a professor, not full time, but as an adjunct. Yeah, immediately in grad school, and then right after I was teaching adjunct part time.
Where were you living?
Right after grad school, I moved to Portland, Oregon, because I got a semester-long residency at the Oregon College of Art and Craft, which has since closed, but that was an awesome school. And so I taught there a little bit. Yeah, I taught a lot of ceramics classes there, and then I also taught at Portland Community College, and then I also taught at Lewis and Clark College. So various teaching gigs when I first moved to Portland.
So you and I met in New York. We know, I think around the time you first moved here, I think
Yeah.
we both moved around the same time. This would be like 2013, 2014, something like that, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So were you teaching here when did you get a teaching job? Is that why you moved out?
Yes, the teaching job that I referred to that I was able to delay for a semester was SUNY Oswego. So I was actually living way like the true upstate New York. I'm upstate now, but I'm like east of the Hudson. Like technically, I guess that's not upstate, whatever. I was like Finger Lakes far away. But that was my first teaching job. And then I basically, long story short, just ended up getting a job where I am now, where I teach in a community college on Long Island and I commute from the city. So my lifestyle is like going back and forth between upstate, my house here, and New York City. And yeah,
So you still have a place in the city,
yes, in Bushwick.
in Bushwick still. Yeah, nice. In your work, it sounds like you had a moment where you had this residency and you had to learn the craft. You had to sort of like you're going to start teaching ceramics, and you had the time, you had the space, the kiln, the studio, the clay. And was there a moment of just sort of it sounds like there was a moment of just kind of letting go into the
Exactly.
practice.
100%. Yeah. Just like, yeah, it just happened. And it was like really freeing and it was amazing.
I feel that looking at your work, there's a real playfulness, there's a freedom there.
I mean, it takes a long time to trust. Like, it wasn't even like conscious that I wasn't really trusting things, or I was like so affected by all these like ideas and like expectations of craft and ceramics and just like all these burdens of history or whatever. And yeah, somehow the freedom of the residency and where I was, the beautiful place in northern Berlin, and run by this amazing couple, Tomas and Kaya, like just they just love ceramic. I don't know, just the space really kind of allowed me to just appreciate the love of this material and glaze. So that really changed my work. And I feel like that's when my work really became from me and really became like more freeing. And then I could, instead of being bothered by craft associations or like tchotchke or like what am I trying to like kitschy associations, I could like take that influence and like work with it or play with it or kind of like nod to it and in different ways, use it as a departure point. Even like traditional forms like a vase, which I thought I would never make, now I make so many vases, but it's a departure point to do something else.
It's looking at your work, I get a sense that all these experiences that you've talked about so far are sort of occurring in it. There's a lot of animal imagery. There's a lot of visceral qualities. There's life and death. I think we should also talk a little bit about plant medicines if you're comfortable with that.
Sure. Yeah.
So you said
But yeah,
early
there's an
on,
element of that influence in there for sure. I hope so anyway.
I sense it strongly. You said there was a moment where you had an experience with psychedelics that was informative early on.
Yeah, I mean there were many moments, like pivotal, like the things that changed me and helped me get over like really intense trauma from childhood. I was raised in a really like Baptist Christian background. Uh I was I had very strong plant medicine or fungus medicine experiences that helped me get over a lot of trauma. But trauma lasts for a long time, so it's an ongoing battle. But yeah, when I was late 20s, after I the experience that I had in 7 months in, like I said, in Asia, and then working there as a river guide, and like spending so much time in the Himalayas, and just traveling through India is like so intense. Oh my God. And so incredible and so beautiful. Like that whole experience, not to mention someone drowning in front of me, like all of that, like wow. And then all of a sudden you're like just snowboarding a teacher. There was a real discrepancy there. I felt like I couldn't really relate to a lot of people because that I was surrounded with. And then I got invited to participate in an ayahuasca ceremony. And okay, so this is late 90s.
That's early.
This is
That's
late,
early.
like very late 90s. I went to graduate school I started graduate school in 2001. So this is like maybe 1999. And I was like, what? I literally never heard of it. Everybody has heard of it now. I had never heard of it. And my friend described it to me. And like, as soon as she said, well, it's like the common word for it is sometimes it's referred to the little death. And I was like, sign me up. And yeah, it was intense. And yeah, it was intense.
I love that that's your reaction. Like usually I think with maybe 90% of people, if you describe that, they'll be like they'll go the other way, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, it's little death. I'm good. It's like I'm
yeah,
good.
yeah.
But that's one thing that I appreciate about you and your practice is that there's an intensity, there's a going towards this experience, this thing where you're really, really going for it. You're not looking away.
Yeah. Well, also, there's other, like I alluded to, there's like a lot of premature deaths in my family. I have a brother that was murdered. I think this was a long time ago. I'm not trying to like drop emotional bombs here, and like other stuff too. So death was like part of my life and consciousness. And even before these things happened, just as a kid, my rising is Scorpio. It's just like that's part of it's in my chart. And yeah, I mean, I think that I do want to understand life and myself fully and why we're here. And I love nature so much. And you can't just be a nature lover and only talk about the stag in his prime. You have to talk about animals killing each other, and animals being flayed and disemboweled by others, and just like you have to talk about the other side, otherwise it's not a true and what wholesome, what am I trying to say, like when some like integrated
Like a
holistic
holistic.
perspective. Yeah,
Yeah, you have to look at entropy as well, right?
yeah. Hmm.
Is the experience of making art a way to try and understand the world? And if so, how so?
Well, yeah, yes, it is. I think in different ways. One thing that I'm experiencing now, so it goes through different stages. And one reason it might go through different stages is because I've done ceramics for more than 20 years. And even though building, I still have to deal with gravity and things are still a challenge. I don't have to think so much about what I'm doing. It's just like if somebody gets better at snowboarding, they don't have to be like, I'm on my toe edge. Okay, flatten it out. Point, point, then, whatever. And then go heel edge. When you become more versed at something, then you can just tap in and enter, for lack of a better phrase, like flow state. So it's shifted. My relationship to the process has shifted, and I've grown with it. And so now, even though it can be hard for me to sculpt and I have to pay attention to the state of the clay, is it drying out too fast? Is it too soft? Like whatever. I'm able to connect. And so the way that I guess your question is, how do I connect to the world or learn about myself through the process? So I one thing that I am interested in doing is like making things that I want to look at, and I want to see them in three-dimensional form, and I want to see them through the material of clay and glaze. And so some of that is influenced by um, psychedelic imagery that's happened through experiences that I've had, or just like how I think about the world. Or some of them is just like maybe it'll just be a vase, but I want it to be like an absurd object that really is pushing boundaries of like what is kind of acceptable imagery and like what is cute, but why is this swan look so demonic with its red eyes or something like that. So I don't know, I guess I use it as a tool to express these ideas in a way that hopefully is more poetic than just, words or an artist statement. And also ceramics helps me understand the world or like my role in it because it's, I think, the oldest art form, right up there with cave paintings. But maybe older, not that it's a competition, because we needed as humans, as we were evolving, we needed to be able to cook food in a container and we needed to be able to carry water in something. And like I talk about this before and with students, like we carried water in like animal stomachs and animal organs, but we also dug up clay and we made a pot and we made a fire and we, we pit fired the pot basically in the fire and we carried water and we cooked food. So there's this like real anthropological, like we have evolved using this material. And so when I work with clay, I'm connecting on that level, on a deeper level with like the human experience. And then also ceramics lasts on planet Earth, especially if it's fired with glaze on it for literally thousands of years. We know about cultures that don't exist anymore, either through the arrowheads that they left behind, definitely not their plastic objects, or the ceramic pots that they left behind, or the shards of those ceramic pots that they left behind. And so, like, there is a responsibility when working with this material because it's going to last, whether you like the way something looks or not. Even if you smash it with a hammer, it's still going to last beyond my lifetime. So I think this is a way for me to understand the world and my connection to humanity and like my connection to the past, people that worked with, made pots in particular or whatever, and then the future, the people or the civilizations that are forever going to continue to work with this material, and then also just like using things from the planet, like clay comes from the planet and like glaze comes from the planet, and on those materials on their own will form their own kind of minerals and mineral formation. So I also think of myself as like, sometimes I call myself an alchemist with clay, like because I'm working with these raw materials and I'm making minerals essentially, but I just like get to choose the shape. Maybe it's some weird flamingo heads coming off of a vase, or maybe it's like a cut open chameleon head or whatever it is. So that's, yes, I experience my connection as a human and to the planet through this material in this way that all the processes of ceramics mimic geology. When I find geology fascinating. So this story is endless. I could keep talking about it.
Please keep go on. So there's so much. I mean, it seems like you're speaking to the past, you're speaking to the future. It's a connection to the earth, it's a connection to yourself. I look at your practice and it seems like a very, very holistic practice in that way. You're dealing with fantasy, you're dealing with trauma, you're dealing with these very, very deep ideas and really what it means to be human. And that it's really hard to articulate. I don't want to even say the purpose because I think making the purpose of art, it's more important than we realize. It's like almost happening on a subconscious level. When you look at something, you get inspired by something, you're making art, you're just participating in this creative endeavor is more than just making the object. It's more than just personal pleasure. It becomes a part of the greater consciousness. So it's more important. And I really get a sense of that, of these ideas looking at your work, which I appreciate. And I wonder if you had some experiences with psychedelics that you've used imagery directly from those experiences?
Yeah, but that's also really difficult. I mean, I think a lot of people think about Alex Gray when they think of like artwork that's directly inspired by images. And man, when I first discovered his work, like in the 90s, I was like so into it.
Yeah.
Now I feel like, oh, I've seen it before. I don't necessarily want to do that, so I try to find a way. I mean, obviously I don't paint, but I want to try to find a way to allude to psychedelic imagery without it being super obvious. Do you know what I mean? Without it being kind of so like cliche in a way, or maybe for a lack of better term, and I'm not trying to offend anyone, but like cheesy, because if if I try to make work about a sunset, like it's gonna fall so flat because the sunset in real life is spectacular. Like I don't want to set myself up for complete failures, a goal I can never achieve. So like I do it in my way. Like I do it like how can I allude to that with a material that will work for it, that will make sense. And like I feel like I can do it with glaze. I can hint at it. I
Use
can
that
hint at
certain textures or patterns or things that are sort of woven into it. And so I'll just say that you and I have sat together on in various ceremonies. There was an experience that I had, and I thought of your work in the context of the shaman. I saw him as a I think I mentioned this to you before. I realized that he was a dragon slayer.
yeah.
Like you remember that? Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know if you were there in that particular one, but he's truly is a master. And I remember thinking, oh, he's killing. I was just like anybody. It doesn't matter how strong you think you are, how big you are, how tough you are. You are utterly just completely destroyed. You're getting all the things that aren't good for you, that aren't useful. He's killing. He's killing these dragons. And then you told me about your piece you had, and I think it was Freeze, right?
Um,
The
oh,
dragon.
oh, well, you mean
Oh,
well, I've made a couple dragons, but recently I had one. Freeze was a mermaid paw, but recently Anton Kern Gallery.
that's right. That was a great show. It was beautiful. Yeah, it's awesome. But it's awesome to see, like, have these experiences with you and sort of like we talk about these things and then to see it sort of in my mind, for me, I'm biased obviously because I'm coming at it from a certain angle, but I think there's an element where if you knew it, you'd see it, but I think you can access it on multiple levels, which I think is really important in having a strong practice. But it's not like you're trying. You're not saying, "Oh, how can I come up with this thing that is accessible on on this level, that level, that's just a product." And I think it seems very effortless. Like you're doing all these things that are maybe simple by themselves, but then you put them together and it's this complex, sophisticated and rich practice.
Yeah, well, thank you. The thing that's interesting is like okay, so when I think about images that come from plant medicine or other experiences, like, because psilocybin's not a plant, it's a fungus, but we could just call it plant medicine as well. But when I think of images that come to me, it's just interesting when I compare notes with other people because the images that I see are always like incredibly intense. And when I describe them to other people, they just get this like really horrified look on their face, especially people that maybe have never, you know, tried plant medicine. Like I realize I need to stop telling them because they're never gonna try it. Because when I see those images, they don't scare me. Like I think it's a shape-shifting um, bat head into a jaguar
It's
into
always jungle stuff,
a
isn't it? It's a
spider. You were
spider,
there this time.
spiders,
A
jaguars, bats.
spider,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
into a monkey, but with really square. Like for some
Yeah.
reason, the monkey was
Yeah,
like the animated one, like a
yeah, yeah.
cartoon. For hours, these shape-shifting heads. If I tell somebody that story that doesn't have experience, they're just like, "Oh my God!" It's like it sounds so scary, but like not scary to me. So I always think about how fascinating it is that the medicine works with images that like that is a visual language that the participant can relate to and understand. So for you, dragon was like something to be slayed. But for me, I had an experience where, and this is, before the more recent dragon I made, but I was sitting and, having a plant medicine, I was in a ceremony and I just saw all these dragons, all these shape-shifting dragons, but they were beautiful. And some of them were made out of fire and flames, and then it was shapeshift into one that was made out of like pearls, and it would shapeshift and it would make another dragon that was made out of smoke. Like they just kept shapeshifting, and like I was at a women's circle. And the woman that was next to me, who I'd only just met like 10 minutes before, we hung out after the ceremony, like the next morning, and sort of like talking about our experiences. And she told me, wow, man, you were sitting up because there was music. So I was sitting up to participate in the music. And she said, so I sat up too. And I looked at my arms, and my arms were growing dragon skin and scales all over my arms. And she said, it's so strange because I never see images like this. I never see anything scary. I never see anything like dragon. And she said, I think it's because I'm sitting next to her. Meanwhile, I was just seeing dragons everywhere, and it was a woman that I had never met before, like I said, right before the ceremony. And anyway, they were beautiful. So I just love that. Do you see what I'm saying? Like you saw slaying the dragon, and I saw like, oh yeah, the beautiful dragon. Like it might as well be a bird or whatever, an angel, but a fierce angel or a phoenix or something.
All these experiences, especially this stuff, is really based on context. But what you said reminded me of how permeable consciousness is. I remember doing a Vipassana retreat, and this guy was like, afterwards, you talking about it, and he was like, "Oh yeah, that I definitely had a thought that was somebody else's thought, and it came into my mind, and I knew that wasn't my thought." And but
That's
it's
so interesting.
yeah, it's weird. But I think that happens more than you think. We're just not able to perceive it because our attention isn't that focused.
Yeah, yeah, that's
And
interesting, but also more reason to make sure the circle is a good one when you're participating.
exactly, that's a great point. And who you hang out with is gonna, if you better like those qualities and whoever you're around, because those are gonna bleed off onto you, and vice versa. So I think the people who you surround yourself with is so incredibly important. And I guess being artists here in New York City, we're very lucky because in my opinion, there's a very high, there's so many wonderful creative people that are really trying, really going for it. And you can tap into that energy.
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing to have a creative practice, you know? I mean, like we're so lucky.
Oh, that's the
Anyone that does
best.
it is so lucky.
It's amazing. And I think just realizing that you have to keep coming back to that and keep reminding yourself how lucky you are to be able to have the freedom to make art. For one, that all your basic needs are met and you can survive, but also on top of that, that you can make art. And to me, that's one of the highest things you could do.
Yeah, yeah. And I also like, obviously making art, there's a desire from a lot of people to like show work and exhibitions and to, kind of be like lauded in the art world, in the art community. And like that's true, but also like I think it's really, really important to remember like why you make art in the first place and like to experience joy and to be in flow state. And I think when that is practice, when you really can tap into that in the studio, then you're really showing your gratitude. It's being like put into or manifested through like a physical object. And so I
Yes,
think that's like it's service. If you think of it that way, it can be service. Like you're giving back. You're
through,
giving back with an object.
through your practice.
Yeah, and through like your experience of the world. So it's different and unique, which is even more reason to like why it's important to like become brave and find your own voice. It's like that's more to give back, you know? Do you understand? Does that make sense?
That makes complete sense. You lose track of the reasons why you made art in the first place. And honestly, if you want a lucrative career, doing art is not it. That's really not. It's really extremely unlikely. It's like, or you could go play the lottery, I guess, or whatever. I mean, like you might get lucky. I don't know, but it's not about that at all. And I think it's a little difficult, especially if you're living in a place like New York, where you see even friends of yours might get a good career going, or they have these shows, and you can get sort of caught up in the feeling of, oh, they're having shows. Why don't I have a show? Like I remember thinking that years ago, but thankfully, like getting into a strong meditation practice, doing Vipassana retreats, getting into plant medicines, all this stuff is very helpful in like, oh yeah, here, like look into this, look what's going on, look into the real reasons why you wanted to make art in the first place, why it's really about connection. And it's about having this conversation, like it led to this conversation, and it's led to so many interesting insights for me personally that I hope extends outward. But it's a tricky thing you have to keep coming back to. And also the world we're in is so it's so consumer, and I'm a consumer too. It's not necessarily a bad thing. You can be a consumer of good things, of quality of experiences, of even production is a kind of consumption, right? Being in the studio, you're consuming this experience of being an artist, which is not it's not bad.
Yeah, but I also think about like what you're talking about is a way to control those feelings of anxiety or like jealousy or anything. If I'm able to be present in the studio, all of that falls away.
Yeah,
I'm just experiencing in the moment in a meditative state while making something. And then the thing is, then I find if I'm in that state, a lot of those opportunities just come because I'm not trying to get them and or because I'm not focusing on what is lacking in my life. Instead, I'm like focusing on the joy or like, practicing joy I think is important and that can be done. I mean, I have so much joy if I'm just like making stuff in the studio and like again being present or flow state. I think in not trying to get things is what attracts things.
absolutely.
It
Yeah.
becomes kind of, effortless in a way. Just put the energy in the studio and like I think there's jealousy. It's I don't think it's that hard to turn it into like just that healthy competition or even like it, I have really worked hard towards if I do feel that way, I wanted to just get me in the studio. I wanted to just
Yeah.
inspire me to work harder. And
Yeah.
we can turn it around. We can turn those things around through practice, through the making.
If some of my friends have commercial success, that's a great thing. We should support each other. Even people that I don't know have commercial success that I don't, sometimes you don't understand why something is popular, but maybe there's something to it that you're not seeing, or maybe there's some other angle to look at it. And I think there's always just in the way that I saw the dragon was something to be slayed. It was things that I didn't like about myself. You saw the dragon as there were kindred spirits perhaps, and then the other woman saw herself as a weird drag. It's like all these different angles to look at the same kind of the same thing, and look, there's so many different. It can go so many ways.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah. Like your work that also obviously like I've noticed how your paintings are evolving and they're also like seem very much influenced by plant medicine experiences. So incredibly different than mine. Not, and I'm not even talking about medium. Like it's just interesting to me because it's your work is like a reflection of your personality. And I think likewise. And I just think that's a beautiful thing when you can really see someone's personality being reflected through their work is the essence of someone kind of coming through their medium, I think is like really cool.
Thank you for saying that. And I appreciate looking at your work and seeing you so strongly. I think you know that you've really arrived at artistic maturity if these objects you're making are you. They're alive, very much alive, and they're your essence. And what a weird thing to be doing. It's truly amazing, isn't it?
It is, but it's also like trying to separate art from culture at any point in time. Like it's also, I mean, profound and it's common. Like we need art. We've always done it. And I think it's like, yeah, again, I felt really, really grateful to be able to, have this as my guiding, like my purpose in life in every way, my livelihood and all of that. My life is basically around it. It's really set up for it.
That's a great point you make. Just to keep coming back into gratitude and remembering, like, oh, this is providing everything that it's such a centering thing that everything around it sort of falls into place. If that's strong, then you feel good about everything else.
Yeah, and I teach too, and I actually really, really enjoy teaching. Like I've been in this role for a long time as a professor, so I've had two full-time jobs, but also like river guiding, that's pretty much very similar role of like leadership or like I said, snowboarding instructor. Like I've just been in this role a lot of like sharing kind of knowledge of the plants, like I said earlier, or whatever. But yeah, I think it's part of the service. It's part of like the service that's how I think about it. Like my service to the world, this sounds crazy, but I already said it, but it's like, is my work, like, is a way I give back, expressing this way. And then it's also through teaching, like a way to share kind of this knowledge and just like, not just knowledge, like how to do things, like here, roll a coil, score it, attach it, not just that, but that as well, but also just like, how to tap into flow state or how to not always be in a hurry, especially with like younger people that, growing up on their phones or, using TikTok so much or whatever it is. Just like put your phone away 2 hours, be present with this material. It's clay. You put your hands on it, you're instantly grounded, whether you're conscious of it or not. And just don't be in a hurry for a second. Like things take as long as they take to make, like let them be realized. And just like that's also part of the lesson as a, in addition to, you know what I mean? Here's how you make a pinch pot or whatever.
That sounds completely sane. That's like one of the most sane things I've ever. It doesn't sound crazy at all. It is a service. It is. It's not just a service to
Like
the people. Yeah.
nurture something to
Yeah.
exist,
Yeah,
that
exactly.
comes from you.
Maybe it's love, right? Is that what it is? Is that what I was thinking about? I had a conversation with a painter about why certain things are durable with time, like why certain pieces historically last. And his answer was that it's specificity. And we determined during the course of the conversation that specificity equals love. You weave this love into it and it becomes expressed through specificity. You get very, very specific in something. And I see that in your work. I was just looking at your website and this is just some beautiful, just beautifully rendered things. I love the cakes and I'm really like transported into these, the textures and the colors and then there's patterns on it. I can see you really just loving the process.
Yeah, I love seeing artwork when I could tell, OMG, that person loved making that thing. Less about labor. I like seeing labor and work too, but you can tell when somebody like really enjoys the process of like making. And yeah, you're talking about the cakes or whatever. I mean, the texture and the glazes. So, one thing that I learned when I had that moment, like I said, I'm just suddenly in a residency. I just got this job, teaching, being a ceramics professor, not a mixed media not a mixed media sculptor or professor, whatever, or what am I trying to say? Like, got this residency with a kiln and a bag of clay, like that's it. Then I just was doing ceramics and like not hiding behind it. And so now it's like I am kind of into the trompe l'oeil thing, but also fantasy, like trompe l'oeil mixed with fun and fantasy. Not always trompe l'oeil. I mean, I make lots of different things, so sometimes maybe it's hard to keep track, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I enjoy mimicking surfaces and textures in of objects and materials with like glaze, like for instance, if I sculpt a snake, I could sit there and meticulously carve out all these scales. Fine, I can do that, but I don't want to do that. I'd rather allude to it with a crawling glaze. It's not going to be exact. It's not going to look exactly like snake scales. It's not about hyper realism, but it's going to allude to snake scales with this crawling glaze. And I think it's more interesting to do that with the material at hand. Do you
It's
understand what I'm saying? It's like really appreciating glaze, like really loving the way something melts, or just like the nuance of firing and glazes and different temperatures and like layering and all this stuff, which is what I like to do. Or even like recently pieces I've done where I'm combining lots of different glazes, layering lots of different glazes just to get an effect that looks like bark. And it looks like bark. It is brown. It is barky. I don't
I
know
think
another word for it. It's like
yeah,
chunky, scaly, matte, and
this is where the alchemy comes in.
yeah, yeah,
You really get in this, you're like a wizard crafting these spells.
yeah, yeah. Exactly. So, I mean, I don't want to have it on record that I'm calling myself a wizard. Your words, not mine. Exploration. I think of it like exploration and like trial and error, and I don't know, working with the material.
There's a real grappling with the materials and I suspect there are moments where you're genuinely surprised about what it does, right?
Oh, not just moments. It's just like everyday practice, constantly.
It seems
Was
like that's got to be a real fun part of it, where you're just like,
it
whoa,
is.
that I didn't know it was going to do that.
It's amazing. It's totally amazing. Like anytime, it doesn't, there's no way you're ever going to open a kiln as a ceramic artist and like not be surprised or not have anxiety or not be exhilarated. Like I'm firing a piece in the kiln anytime, like it affects my sleep. It affects, it takes a day, so work, you won't be able to get it out until the next day. It really holds on to my consciousness. Like when I'm taking a little break from the studio. I'll be back in the studio Monday, but like these transitions going from the city to upstate, I physically have to move and then get settled in and connect with the community that I'm in. And I'm starting to treat these as like little breaks from the studio or just like breaks in general because I really work really hard. I'm in the studio a lot. So I'm currently on a break. I've been gardening a lot, but Monday back in the studio. But the thing is, once that happens, it's like my consciousness is very preoccupied.
What are you growing?
Well, I just planted a vegetable garden, so I just planted green beans so they can because they're nitrogen fixing, and because I kind of this one patch of the bed or the soil, I've already like I grew zucchinis 1 year and then I got giant zucchinis and was like, this is a great spot. Grew zucchinis in them the other year and just like got nothing. I'm like, oh, they depleted the soil of nitrogen, so now I'm growing green beans there to replenish the soil there. Also lots of cayenne pepper, cherry tomatoes, eggplants, parsley, basil, thyme, uh, potato. Let's see how that goes. Yellow squash, cucumber, and then like tons of flowers I mean, like I didn't even know I liked gardening
I love
until
it.
like
I love it.
I have a piece of property. I just like
Yeah.
put things in the ground, and I'm so into seeing
Oh,
what
it's the
happens.
best.
It's
Yeah.
amazing.
I
It's
got a
like
roof garden. Yeah.
much.
It's so good. It really is. I never, I'm like, am I getting old? Is it like a sign of getting old or something? Like you just love gardening, and I'm content just sitting out there and just watching the plants, just and there's all kinds of stuff. There's like these bees that come around. There's this whole ecosystem, little spiders. If you really notice, but I would think if you grow something, there's something different that happens, on a
Yeah.
consciousness level.
I mean, like one way that plant medicine, another thing that plant medicine has taught me is like I've, my current relationship with my brother is like really good and it was struggling for a couple of years for very, different like political and like religious reasons, really. That's the only reason, but
Mhm.
sometimes this can be
Yeah.
quite intense. And one thing that repaired that relationship was like plant medicine. Basically, I had a vision in a ceremony where I took a break. I had to take a break from what was happening because I was having like a real intense moment. And I went and sat somewhere and there was a plant and it was a poinsettia plant. I'm sharing something really personal here. Maybe I won't tell all the details, but the plant had some dead leaves on it. And so I naturally started taking the dead leaves off the plant. And in my hand, I saw my brother's hand because my brother was into gardening. And my hand turned into his hand. And it showed like how we connect through plants, like plant medicine will connect us and repair our relationship. And it really has. And like, it's great. Like we just had a hard moment. Again, it's for the reasons I said, but just yesterday I had these tiger lilies that I knew were getting ready to just the brightest, most saturated orange and they were gonna just burst. And so I took a picture. He's like, send me a before and after pic. So I did before and after, and the after pic of them being open, it's just like, calm down, plant. Like it's almost like it's so exaggerated in every way. It is like there's not an orange. It's like day glow orange, and these giant flowers are just like opening up wide. And I just want to be like, damn, are you a Leo? Calm down. You just like woo, putting it all out there.
That,
So I sent him those photos before and after, and we do that a lot. Send pics of plants back and forth, and it's really great.
that's wild you mentioned that because today I took a picture of a tiger lily for the first time, possibly ever in my life, strangely
That's a
or
sign of
not.
aging.
Yeah, is that what it is? I was just
It's
like,
a sign of
look at
aging.
that. But look at it. I'm just like, it was huge. I was like, what is that? Jeez. It's amazing the color when you like really, really appreciate on a certain level the color of a flower and really, I almost feel like I'm consuming in the way that you'd eat food, like looking at
Yeah.
a flower. I get a sense sometimes it's like my eyes are consuming this color.
Yeah, because it's like so rich and it's
Yeah, so deep.
luxurious. And it's like, no wonder bees are all over that,
Oh
man.
yeah. Yeah.
I'm all over that.
I'm growing some baby's breath. Have you ever smelled that?
Was that the little blue flowers?
Little white ones.
Okay.
Little white
Oh,
ones. They don't look terribly spectacular, but the smell is like just intoxicating. It's like,
oh yeah, I know what you're
oh
talking
yeah.
about. The little tiny white flowers that are always part of flower arrangements.
The smell of those is just insane. Like, doesn't even make sense. It's like I mean, I guess the term baby's breath is pretty apt, I
Yeah.
suppose.
That's interesting because I wonder if they have a different kind of pollinator because there's like certain plants that put off to humans off-putting smells. Like there's some plants that
Yeah.
flowers instead of smelling like sweet and floral, which is typically what attracts hummingbirds and bees, there are some plants that smell like rotting flesh and rotting meat.
Do they attract dragons?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But their flowers, instead of being elevated because they don't necessarily attract pollinators that have wings and that fly around, like those flowers or plants will be like grown really close to the ground, and their pollinators will be like ants or beetles or
Interesting.
even flies
So
and things.
kind
It
of
is
more,
very interesting.
it's a whole world. I think we're just barely beginning to understand what's actually happening on a deeper level with the whole system, plants, flowers, the exchange, of energy, chemicals, all this stuff. Because there's just so many frequencies we can't, so many dimensions, like worldly dimensions that we just can't perceive.
Yeah, 100%.
What information, if anything, do you think enriches the experience of your work for the viewer?
It's hard for me to really be a viewer of my work, but I've heard a lot of people talk about it and I hear how they engage me with me. And I think one thing is the level of detail and also the glaze. And also maybe sometimes the really intense imagery. But a lot of people talk to me about glazes, the glazing. And then again, yeah, detail. But like you talked about the dragon earlier, and so I think you talked about how the imagery is accessible but different. I'm not sure exactly what you were saying there, but like the dragon that was in my show at Anton Kern Gallery, um, it's based on the quintessential dragon form, almost like a way a child would draw a dragon, like a head and a hump and a tail, or even like an image of a Loch Ness monster, right? Where the floor of my sculpture reads as the surface of the water, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? Just kind of a simple version, head, hump, tail. You get the image in your mind. But but there's certain parts that are hopefully zoned in and really detailed and weird. And like that dragon had six breasts. I think of them as udders, because I wanted to reference the wolf that suckled the Roman myth of the twins, Remus and Romulus, that suckled on the wolf mother. And it also had like a unicorn horn or a narwhal horn. It could be interpreted as either or because of, I think about like the cabinets of curiosities and how those had really weird seashells and weird rocks and oftentimes narwhal horns because they were thought to maybe be like unicorn horns. Just this kind of slippery idea of reality and fantasy kind of put together in the same thing. So I think people respond to that too. Like they might see clues that they can relate to, or, almost like inside jokes or inside stories or just nods to different things, both highbrow and lowbrow culture. Like the lowbrow maybe being the shape of the dragon, like I discussed, and then the highbrow being like the Roman myth or whatever.
I love that there's all these little Easter eggs, things that you sort of putting in there for yourself or for other people that happen to know that they can access it. Just these little things that enrich the whole experience, probably for both you as a maker and also the viewer as well.
Yeah, hopefully for the viewer. And then also like humor. I mean, I think there's like humor in there. I think that that's, um, well, that comes naturally in the work, but I also think it's a good kind of tool to offset some of the imagery that might be more like intense or horrific.
Kind of reminds me of some qualities of like metal music. It's not completely always serious. There's an element of it's very intense and but it's not, I wouldn't say that metal is inherently morose necessarily. There's a real,
Well, right, exactly. And actually, metal music, I mean, of course, it's not all equal, but metal music is melodic. Like noise music, I'm not into it at all. To me, there's no pattern, there's no melody. Noise music is just like too random. Like honestly, it's just like I can't stand noise music. And some people think it's like the same as metal. Metal, more melodic in my opinion. So yeah, I agree. I like the intensity. I like visual intensity. And I also like beauty.
Do you listen to music in the studio?
Sometimes, but music can be very distracting to me in the studio unless it's house music. And even that can be distracting because it just makes me want to dance and like it's go dancing all the time, which I do go dancing a lot actually. So, I listen to music.
I've seen your moves.
Yeah, they're good.
They're
There's like
good. Oh yeah, you got the moves. You can cut a rug.
But no, mostly podcasts, mostly storytelling in the
Yeah.
studio. Because if I listen to music, if a song comes on, I will inevitably be like, I gotta rewind this song again. I gotta listen, not rewind. I'm not rewinding, but like I gotta listen to the song again. And wait, what are the lyrics? Oh, I want to watch this video. And then next thing you know, literally I'm like practicing karaoke to the song in the studio. So really distracting. Whereas podcasts, just storytelling, I just devour those. So mostly podcasts in studio,
Do you
all different
read?
type of content.
Do you read a lot as well?
I do. Yeah, I'm always reading, but I'm not reading in the studio.
What other influences would you say are very strong for you as an artist?
As an artist, I mean, I guess I don't know how much I separate being an artist and being a human, my influences, but like, I'm super into nature. I'm really into dancing, like I said, but dancing not just because I like it, but I feel like the dance culture that I've been experiencing in New York City, like going to these dance parties, it's very much about bringing people together. And like some of these parties are free. Sort of like there was different movements in the 90s with the rave culture from the UK or different places in Europe that offered free parties to bring people together as like a political movement against like more fascist regimes that were taking place. So there's a big resurgence in like dance culture that's happening in New York City. So I'm really interested in like kind of what's happening and how like even going to clubs is different now. It's like less meat market vibe, at least in my experience, at least where I go to in New York City, and it's more like everything's consensual, like a man doesn't just touch you anymore. It's very rare for that to happen. Like they should always ask first, for instance. So I'm really into that, exploring how these movements are changing and how like the consent culture is being embraced by just like club culture and dancing, and how like all ages, all ethnicities, all demographics are just like expressing and having this simultaneous experience through music and movement. And I think it's really, really beautiful. So that's a very like it's becoming a bigger part of my life. And then nature, like I do lots of yoga, but I find that when I first come up here from the city, I hardly done any yoga because I'm just like hiking every day. I'm just in the woods, long walks by myself, really connecting with nature. And like yesterday, I had a really intense conversation in the morning, and it was like really upsetting to me. And all of my like nature, not nature and nurture, I'm trying to think of fight or flight. My tendency tends to be more like fight or, fight or flight. I had to move my body. I had like cortisol going through. Like it was a really incredible conversation. So in a not positive, feel good way. So I literally had to go for a 2 hour walk in the woods. And it wasn't until my mind was racing. And it took me an hour and 45 minutes to really be present. And I'm not joking. And I was trying. My mind was racing. I would just be like, be present, be present, like trying to focus on how my feet walking on the ground, like how that feels, my feet on the ground, or like walking past this tree. But it literally took me an hour and 45 minutes. I don't really know why I'm talking about that, but nature, obviously, very big influence. Reading, I read a lot, but I'm always reading novels,
What are you reading right now?
always fiction. I'm reading two books. One is a book called, and I don't usually read two books at the same time, but I am. One is called Butter. It's a Japanese artist, and it's pretty interesting. It's about this female serial killer, supposedly, who's incarcerated, who makes a connection with a writer who's female, and the only way that that writer can get an interview or get close with this person who's incarcerated and gonna go on trial soon, and this is all taking place in Japan, is through like fine cuisine and cooking, and it's a really interesting story that also deals with issues of patriarchy and sexism and all this other stuff while exploring like decadent food culture and learning how to cook and French cuisine in Japan. And like there's all these, I don't have no idea where the story is going, but I'm almost done. And then this other book, it's called In Your Throat, but it's the perspective of a mountain lion that lives in the Hollywood Hills in California. Obviously, that is maybe gay.
That's an interesting
Yeah,
premise. Oh yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
What are some favorite podcasts?
Um, favorite podcasts. Mostly I'm listening to storytelling podcasts. So I really like, God, I can't even think right now. Sometimes I feel when I'm asked this question, I get like put on, okay, Last Podcast on the Left, one of my top favorite podcasts that I listen to all the time. The Last Podcast on the Left. Also, Sasquatch Chronicles. I really like Glamorous Trash. I really like The Emeralds. I've listened to your podcast. I don't often listen to podcasts about art, and I hardly ever read a book about art. I just like storytelling, but I have listened to your podcast and I enjoy it a lot. And also the Art Career podcast, which I actually was on right now, but it's run by my friend Emily McElreath. She's great. I do listen to her podcast a lot. I do, and I enjoy yours and hers because it's just so casual and it could be easy. In a way, it's like storytelling, but it's like storytelling through just conversation. It's not like cerebral art talk or art speak, or at least not the ones I listen to. We go on and on with podcasts, but that's probably a good sampling.
Excellent. Thank you. Before we go, is there anything else you'd like to share with the listener?
I mean, not anything that I could think of right now. No, I don't feel like there's anything I forgot. I mean, honestly, I've just been winging it. I didn't prepare for this. And
I
that's
appreciate
why
that. And
I drank a lot of coffee.
yeah, you did great. Thank you.
Okay, one thing that I could say is just a fun story between you and I. Like, I feel like we were sitting in a medicine circle before, and then the next time I saw you, which I feel like was really soon after, was on the beach. And remember, it was like I was like saving that shark.
Oh yeah.
Saving that shark. I saved that shark.
That shark, we're like, oh my God, is that a shark? Somebody's got a shark. What's going on there? We saw this like my brother and I were walking. We'd just gone to the ceremony like the day before, and there was a shark, and I'm like, I think it's Roxanne, and you were saving this baby shark. It was such a trippy moment. It's like if you think of that and like I had a dream of that, you'd be like, that's weird. I don't know why you would have that dream, but I get a sense that so much of life is it's like a dream in that way. A lot of Buddhist practitioners, a lot of experienced meditators will tell you that it's the same kind of reality as a dream, this reality. So it's relatively real,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting. And like the reason I brought the story up, which I haven't thought of that story in a really long time, but you were reaching out to me the other day, like maybe it was yesterday
Yeah,
or
we talked about
it
the
was
shark,
like,
right?
what?
Yeah.
Oh, a shark came up.
How did a shark come up?
I don't know.
Because
It
you,
was like maybe
oh,
I don't
were you,
remember.
were you at the beach recently?
No, but I think I was texting you and then a shark came to me in another way somehow right at the time that I was texting you, and then it reminded me of that moment.
I think we
Yeah.
had some, did we do some hape after that?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a good moment. That was a beautiful time. And that's the thing, like those are the little moments that really stand out in your mind. Those little like little jewels, little gems. Randomly seeing you at the beach, you saved the shark, we did the hape, and it's beautiful. It's been great knowing you and I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad that you appreciate knowing a shark saver. No big deal putting that on my CV. But yeah, we've known each other for a long time, lots of different
It's been a long
capacities.
time.
Excited for your podcast and excited to be a part of it. And someday I'll listen to it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'm excited for your next show. Actually, I should ask, do you have something coming up?
Yeah, I will. I'm in a group show at the Pit in Los Angeles. That opens in late August. And I have a solo show there in the fall of 2020. What year? Six. Is that right?
Next fall.
Yeah, got to get cracking.
That's great.
And then this in Miami, I'll be showing with Anton Kern Gallery in Basel.
That's great. Congratulations. I think you've just been it's been so cool watching you make these great strides on getting your work out there and just the development of your practice and everything else. And I look forward to our next conversation.